So when I first met the recruiter, he sat down and gave me about a 30-minute sales pitch. And the whole time, I was thinking how unnecessary that sales pitch was. Yeah, I was ready to go. I was primarily based out of the largest military base in Afghanistan, which is Bagram Air Base. Having studied military strategy and having also personally experienced these conflicts, that idea that progress is just around the corner is always a fantasy. The strategy that we employed and the inconsistency with which it was employed essentially meant that success is extremely unlikely.
I spent the majority of my military career as a Cold Warrior, as a true believer. When the Cold War ended, I was making a transition to becoming an academic. I came to believe that the foreign policy establishment in particular succumbed after the Cold War to a militarized version of imperialism.
Apparently it's a radical position to actually talk about the wars that have been going on now for almost 18 years.
It is, and it shouldn't be.
What is the vital national interest of the United States?
Why do we think that we are safer by having 800 military bases around the world?
The American policymakers have gotten very comfortable with the idea that we can solve every problem by having our troops overseas.
The costs of these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have been stupendous. At this point, they rival the total cost of World War II. We can anticipate that there'll still be payments being made to veterans or to veterans' family members of these wars in the 22nd century.
We've become infatuated with militarism as how we engage the world. It really comes down to a systematic problem in our foreign policy decision-making. It's the system itself, but it's also the mindset.
The belief that America has the right to police the world, to be the first, the exceptional, the dominant.
I think we've come to understand that there are no quick fixes. Eliminating Gaddafi through military action didn't solve Libya's problems. The war in Syria certainly hasn't solved Syria's problems. The war in Yemen has only created more catastrophe and pain and suffering.
It's clear that both parties are responsible for plunging the United States into endless war.
American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq.
It is in our vital national interest to send an additional 30,000 U.S. troops to Afghanistan.
I am the most military-based and the most militaristic person on your show.
Some of the excesses that have been taking place in just the last couple of years have turned our foreign policy into a caricature of itself. People are seeing the structural flaws of our foreign policy in a way that I don't think they saw before.
The Quincy Institute proposes that we have other choices, suggests that creative diplomacy may be able to achieve positive change.
To us, responsible statecraft means that we approach the world responsibly, that we center our foreign policy on diplomacy and on military restraint.
We are for genuine engagement in the world. Genuine engagement is not bombing other people.
Diplomacy is hard, I get that. It takes real creativity, ingenuity, courage, focus, and a commitment to sitting at the table with an adversary.
Quincy is going to fill a vital gap in a discussion about U.S. foreign policy, which challenges the ruling order of a militaristic, bellicose American foreign policy that looks to use its military strength to answer problems.
The Quincy Institute opposes wars of choice that put the lives of our troops needlessly at risk. We favor a military establishment that is sized and organized to protect the nation's vital interests.
Quincy is urgently needed right now because there is becoming a widespread sentiment in the American political debate that the foreign policy we've pursued for at least the past 2 decades, if not since the end of the Cold War, has failed.
So now America has a choice. We should either accept endless armed dominance and the endless war that goes with it, or we should chart a new course.
In 1821, Secretary of State John Quincy Adams said that America goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy. If she would, she would change from within and lose the very characteristics that makes her America.
In so doing, we corrode our own democracy. Going out in search of monsters leads to fear, leads to a shutdown of civil liberties.
He was very prescient in seeing that the United States should be engaging in a way that's peaceful, in a way that makes people want to work with us, not be fearful of us.
200 years later, we can see that unfortunately, what he warned about is happening. But it is not too late to turn this around. There's plenty of people on the left, on the right, that have plenty of disagreements, but on the idea that we need to have a new foreign policy that moves us away from these endless wars, they fully agree.
The Quincy Institute's vision is a world where peace is the norm and war is the exception.